So rook takes rook is played by Magnus. Knight takes, and now I would like you to pause this video and think, what is this amazing move that Magnus came up with? It's really a very little move, but a very power-packed one, and I'm really amazed with this next move that Magnus comes up with. Ooh, Queen d6. Now, why is this move so powerful? See, firstly, the knight cannot move. c4 is falling. This knight actually is run out of squares. If you go to c3, it blocks the queen's path here. And if you move the queen to defend this knight, then the e5 knight falls. So actually, this move, little queen d6 move, has put white under so much trouble. You can see Levan's time right now is 43 minutes. He's thinking about what to do. But it's not so simple, his plan. But there is a possibility, you can actually play, and now his time is down to 26 minutes. You can play a move like h3, and it might seem very foolish. What are you doing? Aren't you simply dropping the knight here? But the point is, after let's say h3, queen takes d1, queen b8 check, king g7, and then queen takes a7, attacks the knight and also the f7 pawn. So that gives white a clearly winning advantage here. So that's the reason why actually Magnus' move does not have a threat as yet here. He doesn't have a threat to take, but it's still something, you're putting pressure here, you are making your opponent react. Also, when you're facing Magnus, you are a bit stressed out. So Levan taking his time, and now I think finally he has to make a move, because he has to play another 15 moves in the next 26 minutes, which is not so simple. The real option really looks like, making some kind of an improving move, h4, h3, maybe e3. No, he goes knight to f3. And his point is, if you take here on d1, I'm going to take the knight on f6. Magnus returns to his chair and he's thinking whether he should take the knight or not. But isn't that losing a pawn? Yes, he takes it. Queen d1 first. Now Levan must take the knight on f6. He does so. But now c4 pawn. This is falling. I think the reason why Levan went into this variation, Magnus takes it. He takes the pawn. He went into this variation is hoping that he can somehow launch an attack against these pawns with knight g5 perhaps. He plays e4 first, which is important, because if you went knight g5 check first, of course queen d7 is possible, but so is queen d5 check. And so with e4, he has stopped the queen from coming here. And now Magnus plays another brilliant move. What a move this is. This is so good. He's attacking this pawn, queen d3, and it's these little moves which make it so difficult to beat him. His queen is very well placed. It's looking at the pawn. It's also, just around the white's position, white camp. And here Levan Pantsulaia now looking to move his knight. He plays his knight to g5 and he tells Magnus that your f7 pawn is weak. I'm going to take it. And now Magnus brings his queen back and defends the pawn on f7. Yes, white is active for the time being, but you can always push the knight back with h6. Later, you can get your knight out from c4 and start pushing your pawn down the board. h4 played. And I think it's time to get the knight off. Magnus taking his time. He has 34 minutes. His opponent is down to 22 minutes, but here Magnus thinks for a full 15 minutes on the clock. He's down to 19 and plays h6. So a move like h6 is a big responsibility. Why? Because the king side has become even more soft. But with accurate calculation, you can take those decisions. Queen c6 played, attacking once again the pawn on e4, and there's no real great way to save it. If you play queen f4, there's knight d6. And he plays his pawn up to h5. He sacrificed another pawn. You could see Levan just taking a glance at Magnus. What's your intention here? You know, one of the things with Magnus is that he never gets intimidated. He takes the pawn and he tells Levan, prove your compensation. Why have you given me the pawn? H takes on g6. And now, of course, Magnus shouldn't take with the pawn because it creates more weaknesses. But he can take with the queen. Yes, he takes with the queen. And of course you can't trade the queens, because in the knight endgame you are not just one but couple of pawns down. Position is far from over, mainly because the white queen is very active and also the king is well defended on g2. Queen comes back to f4, looking at the h6 pawn and also at the b8 square. Queen to d3, and here the best move is to simply chop off this pawn on h6. Somehow after queen h6, queen f5, black is in the game. You know, there's no problem here. I mean, white is in the game after queen h6, but he goes queen b8, which is a big blunder. It's a big mistake. Now, the reason why this is a mistake, you will understand that although white is going to gain back one pawn here, which is an important pawn, what he's losing is king g7. What he's losing is that after queen a7, his queen is completely out of the game. And Magnus now is having a great move up his sleeve, which is easy to miss. He's going to sacrifice his knight now. It's a very nice position. He goes knight e3. Look at this move. If you go king g1, there is queen f2, queen f1 and queen g2 mate. If you go king h2, then again there are problems, like for example queen f1 or even queen e2. These are the problems there. So the only way to remain in the game is to actually pick up the knight, and which he does. He takes the knight. Magnus goes in with a check. Now look at Magnus's calculation. This is very important and very beautiful. I'm not going to make the moves on the board, but this is something that he has calculated already. King h3, queen f3. And the question is, why can't you simply take this pawn? So the moment you take this pawn, black gives a check. King has to come up, f pawn check. King has to go to f4 and queen e4 mate. So this is the kind of calculation which makes these long-term plans work. It's these short calculations which are always difficult. So this pawn cannot be won, and then you can try and push it down towards becoming a queen. He goes a4. Magnus gives a check. King g4. And now you want to play f5 and mate him, because king f4, there's queen e4. However, this pawn is pinned, so you can't push it. He gives a check. Again, a nice move, forcing him back, and Magnus gets up from his chair because it was the 40th move. And generally on the 40th move you really want to get up, get some refreshments, eat something, go to the washroom. But because Levan made his move very quickly, Magnus had to do it in his own time. He pushes his pawn to c4. Now you'll see that the clock hasn't added 30 minutes. That's because the clock will first run down to 0 and then the 30 minutes will be added. That's how the rule is. Queen goes to c7. The queen is still pinning the pawn, so there's no mating net as such. But now you can go king g6 with the idea of check and f5. Yes, he plays king g6. Brilliant chess by Magnus Carlsen. He gets up from the chair just like his opponent. Actually, Magnus gets up from his chair in confidence, while his opponent Levan Pantsulaia, I think, is getting up more from the fact that he hopes that this game ends very soon now. So Magnus is in complete control. There are no checks in the position. Queen h1 and f5 are the biggest threats. Levan comes back and we must see what he plays. King h2 played by Levan, and now Magnus can actually give a check here and chop this pawn. He does it. He gives a check. This would be an extra pawn now. He would be 2 pawns up then. King h3 and take the pawn on a4. Magnus making sure his final calculations are in order. He takes on a4, and against Magnus such a position is hopeless. Against any top player, but more so against Magnus because he's just so good at converting minute advantages. And here you have